there is a punk rock DIY ethos to theater making, even at its like most corporate levels, because you're hiring actors, real artists and actors who come with that ethos preloaded, that just exists in the room. And we're gonna go out there and we're gonna make some theater, and once all the bean counters get the hell out of the room, it's just me and the audience. The instant everybody's clear of the room and the audience is in, and it's just the artists engaging with the audience, that's it.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Thomas Sadoski is an actor. He sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
You land the role, you have the script, you close the door, it's just you with the script.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you do to try and get into this character? Like, what's your first initial step?
My first initial step with any script, you know, once I realize that is mine, and it is now my job, is just to walk through the play, gathering information and gathering questions. Who is this person that I'm playing? But more importantly, why is the playwright writing this? Why is the writer writing this? Why have they set it in the time, the location that they have set it? What are they trying to say? And what does my character do in terms of pushing that story forward? What's the role? You know, literally, you know, what is the purpose of the character? Because I come from the theater, right? And very rarely do you come across characters in the theater, in plays, that have no purpose, that serve no purpose. Everybody's there to move the plot forward in some way, to move the story forward in some way, to cost somebody something, to provide an obstacle or a challenge, or to overcome an obstacle, or to inspire, whatever it is. Every character has a role in the story, and the story being the overall drive of what the writer wants to accomplish, what they're trying to say, and what they're trying to reflect about humanity and the world back to humanity and the world. So I feel like starting at a macro level, of attempting to understand to the best of my ability right out of the gate what those things are. Now, more often than not, I am left with infinitely more questions than I am left with answers, which is great. It's a great place to start. That's where I feel like all art should start. All art should start with a question, and probably end with a question, at least for the artist. You know, if answers are achieved in art, they should be achieved by the audience. So I start with the big questions, and then over time, you know, the macro lens gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter into more and more specific moments, more and more specific words, more and more specific, you know, phrasing and creation of character. And, you know, once I start to really understand the dynamics of time, implication, you know, all of that stuff, I can really start to understand who this person is and the way that the writer wants them to exist in their world.
Like, let's just say you've realized that this person is really the antagonist of the main character. There's a point probably where you're like, all right, I know the role of this person now in this play, and I can see it clearly, but I have to now internalize something, and so it's coming from some organic place instead of just playing the idea of being the antagonist. I mean, I'm not even saying this right.
No, I think I know. I think I understand what you're saying. Like, you can't just ride the result.
Yeah, the result. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You can't play the result. The result is being to antagonize.
Yeah.
You can't play that result because then there's no character. Then you're just an idea.
Is that just an instinctual shift over to that, or is that like something where you're like, okay, now I know I'm going to now find the thing and play this way, and kind of leave the objective thing behind?
For me, the answers to the questions that I was just talking about, as they get more and more specific, start to dial in a human being. Right? So as you're going through the script and you're gathering information, not just about the macro stuff like time, place, and all that sort of stuff, but who? And you're getting information about this character from other characters in the show. Not just what that character says about themselves, but what other characters say about them. So you start to learn about who this person is. And the more you start to understand the dynamics of who they are, what they say about themselves, what other people say about them, what space they occupy in the world, where they come from, what their day-to-day world looks like, a character starts to just take shape, you know? And once that character takes shape and you have your objective, your understanding of what this person is attempting to achieve in this moment, then the transition to communicating that's ultimately like, you know, when you get into performance and in rehearsal first and foremost, but then into performance, and I put that in quotes, that leap becomes all about tying off two separate entities. So you have this entity of this character that exists, that you've discovered through these questions that you've asked and answers that you've received. And then you have your own truth, your own experience that you've carried with you in your own life and that you've witnessed, right? Being played out through all the human beings that you've come across and interacted with in your life. And finding how you bond those two things with honesty and compassion. You know, that's the big one for me. I've had the opportunity to, throughout my career, a number of times play some people who would be considered to be pretty nasty characters, you know, that people aren't necessarily rooting for. And I can't afford to have that opinion of these people when I go in there. I have to view them with compassion and objectivity. These are human beings just like everybody else who are struggling to get through moment-to-moment human existence just like everyone else. And so finding the honesty, finding the reality, finding the soul and the reasons and the how this person and why this person thinks that their behavior is actually going to make something better.
Even bad people want to make something better.
Yeah, whether that's through protecting themselves,
Yeah.
providing safety for themselves, providing safety for their family, loved ones, whatever, tearing something down, whatever it is. Everyone is attempting, I really truly believe, even in their core of tearing something apart, destroying something, unless you're a sociopath, there is at least a whisper of a belief that by doing something, you're going to make something else better. And even if that is completely selfish act, it's all about self-preservation, that's still an attempt to make something better. And so that is what I have to find and locate and ride, you know. I've heard it described by directors as playing the positive, you know, going inside and just like looking and locating, like what is the positive choice, how, you know, because listen, it's hard. It's not easy to get in there and to play that stuff, you know. So just like it's not easy to be a human being walking the world and always maintain a positive outlook on anything. But once you start tying off those threads to each other between yourself, your experience, and this character and how they experience things and what they're experiencing, then you have this sort of rope bridge that you walk. You know, and then at that point, it's just your job to carry that with as much courage and honesty as you can, and the audience will decide from there what it means to them.
You are one day away from the first performance of this new play, right?
Yeah.
White Noise.
Yeah, tomorrow is our first preview. Which will be the first time. Last night was the first time any audience had ever been present for this play, And tomorrow night will be the first time that a paying audience has ever been present to hear the words of this play.
Okay, and this is Suzan-Lori Park.
Suzan-Lori Parks, Pulitzer Prize
Amazing
winner.
writer,
Yeah, she's extraordinary, yeah.
Tell me though where you are right now with this. So you performed it last night in front of people, and now
friends and family.
Friends and family.
Yeah.
Kind of like a safe thing. If
Very,
it
very
goes
safe.
Wrong.
Yeah.
So what happens now before tomorrow night? Like, did you guys meet today to like?
No, today our union fought very hard for us to have a day off once a week. So today is that day. So tomorrow afternoon we'll get together and we will rehearse for 4 hours, and then we'll take a little bit of a dinner break, and we'll come back and start getting ready for the show. You know, everyone has got their own routine. And then, you know, at 7 o'clock tomorrow night, the lights will turn on, the curtain will go up, so to speak, and we'll take this play and put it in front of a New York audience.
How do you feel about it? From your point of view, like, are you in a good place with it?
In what way?
Well, I guess I mean specifically about your own performance.
Perfectionism is the greatest enemy of art. And so I have had to work, here 20 years into my career, I have had to work desperately hard over the course of 20-something years to get to a place where I am able to say, I am good where I am right now. We rehearsed this play in 3 weeks. It's a 130-page play.
Oh my God.
It is an extraordinarily thick piece of writing, like all of Susan's work is. And for where we are in this process, I am aware that we are where we are. And we can't be anywhere else,
Yeah.
you know? And so we're at a place now where we're going to start learning from the final character in the play, which is the audience.
Right.
And so we're going to start this, we're going to start this commune. We're going to start this, in the true sense, you know, we're going to, a commune meaning a place where you communicate, a place where you come to community, a place where you give freely, you know, and take what is offered as much as you are able or need. And so that's where we're at right now, and it's a thrilling place to be. You know, of course, there's always like that little ego voice that barks in your head that says like, you want to go out there and win the Obie on the first night, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's impossible. Like, you can't do it. You know, you want to be perfect, you nail this thing and give Susan her show right out of the gate, and it's just impossible. It can't be done. It can't ever be done. Throughout the course of this run, we will never have a quote unquote perfect show. It will be different and it will grow and things will become, and we have a lot of rehearsing left to do and a lot of exploration left to do, and we learned a lot from our invited dress rehearsal last night, and we continue to hone this play. And so we're going to be rehearsing on our feet in front of an audience who are going to be joining us in this endeavor. And that, I think people need to understand that as theater goers, when you're coming to previews, particularly early previews, that's the role you occupy.
Mm-hmm. You don't think about that. We don't think about that.
No, you're joining the process.
Yeah.
You know, and you're an active participant in the process. If you want to lay back and see the show and have the show delivered to you, come late in the run. But if you want to be an active participant in the growth of the process, come early in previews. Leave your judgment at home and come and join us as another member of the theater community, and we'll all grow together. You know, and that's for me, that's sort of the thrilling thing, is that you a lot of times do get audience members who understand that, that come to previews. The unfortunate reality, particularly this day and age, is that you get, armchair critics who come right out of the gate and start posting online reviews about your first preview. And, we have 3 weeks of rehearsal left before we open this thing. We have 3 weeks of rehearsal every day during the day, plus shows at night. I guarantee you that the show we do tomorrow, as opposed to the show we do on March 20th when we open, will be vastly different.
You do movies, TV comedy, regular TV, theater. What's your happy place? And is there anything in the DNA of one of them that you would like to inject into another one, like to make that your happy place? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it makes complete sense. Theater has always been my home, or my artistic home. I hesitate a little bit to be too critical of film and television, because it sort of feels like it feels like a well-trod path, that theater actors bitch about film and TV.
Yeah.
And yet, I am nothing if not a person with a slightly incendiary spirit in there somewhere. And so I'm more than happy to say that theater is my artistic home, and it's my artistic home because that's actually where the art lives. Film is a director's medium. It is not a writer's medium. It is not an actor's medium. It is a director's medium. Television is an advertiser's medium, particularly network television. Although things have changed now with different platforms, Netflix and Amazon and Hulu, and even Apple is making TV shows now. When those platforms are most successful, frankly, is when they follow the HBO model, which is stay the hell out of the way.
Yeah.
Hire great people that you trust, that you believe in, and get the hell out of the way. When we were shooting the Newsroom, Richard Plepler and Casey Bloys and the people who were at HBO, who were tremendous shepherds for that show, and wildly supportive. Their notes to our show were always an attempt to push us further artistically, or push us into places that we may not be comfortable, or to push us into blind spots that we may not have recognized that we had, And that is artistic engagement.
Yeah.
I am on a network comedy now, and the notes that we get from the networks are all about pushing us away from being challenging, pushing us away from pushing boundaries, pushing us into something that is more marketable and more theoretically easy for an audience to digest.
I'm just curious, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but why is that? Like, I like that show, Life in Pieces, and I don't like a lot of TV comedy right now, especially on the networks. So they must be ignoring the notes then.
Well, we have a cast that if you look at it, when you start to peel back the resumes of a lot of those people, what you start to see underneath it all is Betsy Brandt comes from the theater. Diane Wiest, obviously, comes from the theater. Colin Hanks has done theater in his life. Angelique Cabral went to theater school at Indiana University. Zoe Lister-Jones is a New York theater rat. I'm a theater rat. Neil Cunningham is, a New York theater rat. Holly Barrett did West End theater. When you really start to see, Dan Bacadal did however many decades of improv in Chicago. He was, Second City guy. That ethos is ingrained deeply in a lot of the cast members. And then Brolin is Brolin.
Yeah.
You know, he's been doing this stuff forever and just sort of refused to ever get on board with whatever anybody, you know, he's just sort of like, I do what I do.
Yeah.
I do what I want to do. So there is that preloaded ethos is pretty deep inside of all of us, and we're pushing. We are pushing. Our writers start really big and get reeled back in, but when you go farther out, even when they pull you back, you're still further afield than a lot of places. And you know, we have sort of done our best to, you know, under the circumstances in which we work, push and push and push. And, you know, I think we've been more or less successful in doing it in the environment that show operates in. And I think that's part of the reason why you don't see it being as supported, frankly, by its network, as other shows are. I see our writers, I see our cast, I see our crew work so hard day in and day out, and it is heartbreaking to see a cast that talented, writing staff that dedicated and that talented, a crew that brilliant and that loving and that, you know, is that talented and shows up every day. It's heartbreaking to see all of those people work so hard, believe so much in what they're doing, enjoy each other so much, and then go out into the world and have people say, what are you doing right now? You know? Yeah. Well, I'm on this show on CBS. We pull 7 million viewers a week. Well, who's in it? You start listing names and they go, well, if I had ever known that show was on, I would have watched that. You go, well, yeah, I know. You know, and frankly, I'm tired of hearing that. So, you know, it's very strange. It's a very strange thing, and you know, who knows what's going to happen with it moving forward. But it is that, in sort of in a nutshell, is kind of why I'm just so happy to be coming back to theater. You know, and I've had the opportunity to work with some truly brilliant filmmakers and Jean-Marc Vallée and, you know, Amy Kopelman and Brian Kopelman and Amy Heckerling and, you know, people who I just have a tremendous amount of respect for as not only as human beings but as artists. And when I have the opportunity to work with artists like that in film, I'm always grateful for it. But the thing that I keep on hearing more often than not when it comes to film is the writer and director love you. They really want you for this, but you're not famous enough, so they're going with somebody else. I genuinely don't know what that means. I also genuinely am terrified of a world in which, and this was something that came up a few years ago, not only to me personally, but came up in the news, just sort of came up in our sphere. I'm genuinely terrified of a world in which hiring decisions for our theoretically artistic endeavors are made based on social media following numbers.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, you have tremendous artists like John Leguizamo who got caught quotes buying Twitter followers. Now people were like, "Whoa, that's ridiculous," and you know, they took shots at him for it. I completely understood what he was doing. I completely understood why he was doing that. Because John Leguizamo he's a gift. He is, I mean, he's almost indescribably important, particularly for people of my generation. As an artist, the stuff that John has done, the quality of talent that he possesses, and what kind of sick world do we live in where John, in order to feel like he can preserve the opportunities or put himself in a place where he gets more opportunities, has to do something like that, or has to have an assistant who does something like that, from whether he knew it or not. Listen, I don't know the ins and outs of that story. I'm just
Yeah.
You know, but that to me, like that scared me.
Yeah.
It broke my heart and it scared me. When we're in that place, and that's why you see the same 50 faces in all these movies.
Do you find that other people are equally scared, or do you feel alone in this fright? Like your peers?
I don't think that I'm alone by any stretch of the imagination. I've heard this, I've had this discussion with people for years and years and years and years. I also think that there is probably a portion of my peers, I don't know how big or how small, that wouldn't have this conversation publicly,
Right.
because they're afraid that it might cost them.
Yeah.
But I've sort of resolved myself to the reality that, frankly, on some level, I kind of, people say, well, how can you take pot shots at the Oscars, and you aren't afraid to come out and take shots at Jason Bateman and those people, in that Arrested Development interview around Jessica Walter and stuff, like, aren't you afraid of what it's going to cost you? And it has cost me.
Yeah.
It has cost me work. But the reality of the situation is that those people don't have what I want. They got nothing I want. And if they don't have what I want, it can't cost me anything. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, if me being myself and me being honest and me being open and me carrying myself with some level of integrity is going to cost me work, then is it really work I want to be involved in? Because I tell you, if this is how it is before we get on set, what's it going to be like when we're on set? And so I don't have a problem standing out here. I certainly am not alone. And I appreciate and love and respect people who are willing to stand out here too. And I appreciate and love and respect people who don't want to go there. Just want to keep their heads down, just want to do their thing, just want to work, and that's cool. I get it. That's not how I was raised as an artist. I was raised as an artist to believe that it's one of my primary responsibilities is to engage. I have to engage. And I think that that's another part of the whole, Hollywood culture that just sort of happened over time, is like, if you just keep your mouth shut and do your job, your job is to just get up there and do the thing that we're paying you to do and make people happy. And, you're an entertainer. And, that's still around a lot today, particularly social media. You have people telling, you're just an actor, what the hell do you know? Why don't you shut up and make movies? That's that's all we want out of you. And I refuse to do that, because I refuse to tell a plumber to shut up and just do his job. I refuse to tell a banker to just shut up and count the pennies. No, we live in a society that demands and requires engagement out of all of us. I really wish, and to answer your question about, is there something in the DNA that I wish I could inject into the other? There is a punk rock DIY ethos to theater making, even at its like most corporate levels. There is still, because you're hiring actors, real artists and actors who come with that ethos preloaded, that just exists in the room. And we're going to go out there and we're going to make some theater. And once all the bean counters get the hell out of the room, it's just me and the audience. And once that happens, I heard this great interview with Joe Strummer, and he talked about the moment that music changed for him. It's when he and the 101ers were getting ready to play a gig, and the opening act went out, and he could hear something in the crowd had changed in a way that he had never heard a crowd change before. And he said, what the hell is going on out there? So he walked out into the audience, and the opening act was a band called the Sex Pistols. And what they were doing, which no one else had done up until that point, was saying, we're out here playing what we want, and we don't give a damn what you think about it. And that was the moment for Joe Strummer when something clicked and music changed. That ethos exists in the theater. The instant everybody's clear of the room and the audience is in, and it's just the artists engaging with the audience, that's it. And I wish I could take that DNA, that spirit, and inject it into films.
I have a one-word question
Go for it.
that I'm going to phrase in the form of a sentence. Sorkin. I feel like you fit in Sorkin's way more than other actors do. It feels like it comes out of your mouth easier than it does other actors.
I don't know. I don't know what other people's experience was. I will tell you that working with Aaron's work is difficult because you are word perfect.
Right.
And that just in terms of man hours,
Right.
you know, takes quite a bit of time. However, I will say that coming from the theater, and I think Daniels would say this, Sam would say this, Johnny maybe said this, Chris Chalk would say this, you know, any number of the people, Alison Pill certainly would, that coming from the theater, and I think this is why Aaron picked theater actors,
Right.
that demand is an expectation, that's just in the theater, that's what we do, right? So we're shooting the Newsroom in Los Angeles. Takes place in New York, but we're shooting it in LA. And we had any number of actors come in who were guest stars on our show, who came in, who thought that Aaron's script was, like everything else in Hollywood, a suggestion. I don't really need to work on it. I get a rough idea of it. I'll come in and then, you know, this is an inspiration, it's a suggestion, and then like, I'm going to dictate where this goes. And they got on set and we would rehearse and they wouldn't know what the hell they were saying. And we're not only word perfect, but there's a jazz flow to Aaron's work that you get on board with.
Yes.
And he writes in a rhythm. It requires that you speak in a rhythm.
Yeah.
And the great thing about Aaron is that as long as you are willing to play within that construct, his words as written, and the rhythm which is dictated to you through the writing, as long as you're willing to play within that world, he is hands off. It's incredible. Yeah, do that. Oh, I like what you were doing with that. Great, do that. Oh yeah, no, I never thought of that, but that's great. As long as you're playing within that world, he's such a great collaborator. You know, he's so generous in that way.
I'm trying to pinpoint something in you that I've responded to, and then I'm trying to figure out, like, I feel like you understand what your face does. I usually don't like actors that I think understand what their face does, because I feel like they are in some kind of conscious surface level work. I don't feel like that about you. I feel like you're conscious of what your face does and you do what's necessary to not let it fall into something that would make me think you're working surface level.
Right.
Does any of this make sense to you?
Yeah. So in theater school, one of the first classes that we took was in physical acting, right? And regardless of whether it was that class or any of the classes that I was in theater school, one of the first things that they were teaching us, that they were hammering home to us, was, what are you doing? How is your energy being expressed? because we all have energy inside of us. How is it coming out? Be aware. Not to say that you need to manipulate it, but be aware. If you have like a tick, something that you're doing repeatedly, when something comes up, that limits you. So be aware. You start limiting your choices, you start limiting your effectiveness, you start limiting your ability to communicate different things in different ways if you're not aware. And then we took these mask classes where you literally put on a neutral mask and you had to express scenes through your use of your physical body. And then you do the reverse. You basically like put on a grotesque mask that sets you into one very specific place that the audience is looking at because of the nature of the face of the mask that's there, and like fighting against that. How do you work against that? How do you work into it? People work in so many different ways, right? So you have your Day-Lewis, who just goes for full physical transformation. And God, I wish I could do that. I look at that and I'm just completely and utterly blown away by that. Day-Lewis, Christian Bale does it, that sort of thing too, where they just disappear. They just disappear. And that is impressive, and it is certainly one way to go. And there are other actors who don't do that, who go for smaller, more subtle transformations. But I think every artist is attempting to transform on some degree. Now, I occupy my own little weird personal space in which I occupy because I grew up on Spencer Tracy and Brando, Jimmy Stewart, Charlie Chaplin, and the Three Stooges. And Sidney Poitier, on one extreme, and, literally Chaplin on the other. So this thing that I have that I've fought against through a large part of my career, that eventually sort of gave way over to, and then learned to start managing, so to speak, bringing under wraps, is they have these two poles. And it is in my nature to start big and get small. That's why theater is really sort of the most at-home place, because I have time to work down, to start big and go down. Now, the unfortunate reality is that when you're shooting a TV show or you're shooting a movie or whatever, you only get a few takes. So for somebody who works the way that I do, when you go big and then you work to get smaller and smaller, you have to do it faster and faster in the course of a couple of hours rather than a couple of months. And oftentimes that doesn't make it. Everything that you've done at every point in that growth process is on film, and an editor's got it and is going to do whatever they want with it. So a lot of times, and when I watch like stuff, film, whatever that I've done, I will see myself at a size, that I'm like, oh God, that's embarrassingly broad. And yet, because of the way that I work, regardless of what I'm doing, am attempting to tie some level of honesty to everything that I'm doing. Yes. So sometimes it's honesty dialed up to 11 in terms of size, and sometimes I get some time to bring it down and bring it down and bring it down and bring it down and bring it down, and I'm like finally down in the more subtle, more human areas of things. Nonetheless, it still all comes from this place where I'm working with honest feeling and honest storytelling. Not to say that, like all actors, I don't have my bag of tricks, But I don't rely on that. And that stuff I use as a last resort rather than as the primary and entirety. And there are some people who do. And again, I think that this is one of those situations where you start running into where people are more interested in personality than craft. I don't want a craftsman. I want a personality, because I know what I'm going to get from that personality. It is going to be this, 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 this. I can see the edit in my head already because I know exactly what that person is going to give me, because that person is incapable of giving me anything else.
And the exact timing of that thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because that's what that person does, and they don't do anything different.
Yeah.
Okay. And that works for some filmmakers who really need to be in control of exactly how a story is told. I think before we started recording, we talked about, you said you weren't sure, how directors, then you feel like directors don't really know how to talk to actors a lot of times. And that's been my experience too. But I will also say that part of what I have run into is directors who are afraid to collaborate, who are afraid to have their idea of what this thing is changed. And, that exists in the theater as well, but with a lot less frequency. And in as much as actors need to be fluid and able to take notes and able to carve their craft and carve their performance, directors need to be open to a story that changes. This is what you think you're making. But more often than not, when you start bringing in more hearts and more minds, things grow and they change and they surprise you. Holy shit, I didn't know this was the movie we're making.
And then they have to adjust.
And then they have to adjust.
Yeah.
Now, that's scary because you have a lot of things pre-planned and schedules and this, that, and the other. And I get it. And that's why rehearsal is so important. And nobody rehearses films anymore. You get in a room with a group of actors and you start doing stuff. Holy shit, hey, this is the movie we're making. I thought we were making this story, but it turns out we're making this story. That happens in plays all the time. Even to playwrights. Shit, that happened to Sorkin. I thought this was the story we were going to be telling in this moment, but no, it turns out we're actually telling this story. And we can do it within the framework of my words. Awesome. Go. That's just exciting. Artists are excited by change.
Yeah.
Scared by it, but excited by it. Resistant to a certain extent to it, but they don't refuse it.
Right.
And that's the place that we have to get to. That's where the collaboration happens. That's where things start to change, and that's where art really begins. And that's where we've got to go. We have to start working together. We have to allow things to change. When I walk onto a set and the director has already blocked a scene, I know as soon as I walk onto a set and a director has already blocked a scene, that the notes I'm going to be getting during the shooting of that scene are going to have absolutely nothing to do with collaboration. They're going to have everything to do with achieving result. And that is a crippling feeling for an actor. If you're not willing to allow your medium to bend you, then you're not creating art. Then you're just carving ego. And it's not to say that there aren't tremendous accomplishments that have been made by doing that, that your tremendous idea that you have had isn't worthy of being expressed exactly as it is. But that's not, we live in in an art form that requires community.
We're shortchanging the art.
Yeah, and we're shortchanging our audience.
Yeah.
You know? If you're here for entertainment and you need to follow the formula, boom, do it. Awesome, go for it. You know, formulas are important. It allows people to just sit back and turn off their brains. I know exactly what's going to happen. I know what's going to go on. I know how this is going to play out. Great. But that's not why I'm in it.
Thomas Sadoski, thank you for this.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.